Hello and welcome to the Design Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Chris Whyte, and in this podcast series, we explore the career journeys of design and engineering leaders from the world of physical product development. In today's episode, I'm joined by Tim Morton, Director for Global Design North America for Husqvarna. Chances are you might be familiar with the Flymo brand of lawnmowers and trimmers. Hailing from Sheffield in the UK, we discuss how he moved to Chicago in the early 2000s, working for Lego and now Husqvarna. We talk about lessons learned and embracing change amongst other things, so settle in and let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Design Journeys podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by Tim Morton. Originally from Sheffield, Tim moved to Chicago in 2000, but prior to that he studied industrial design at the University of Wales in Cardiff and is now Director of Global Design North America for Husqvarna. He spent time at New York Brands, PDT and Lego. He's also spent some time teaching and picked up over 20 design awards in that time. So, yeah, welcome to the podcast, Tim. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks very much for the invite.
You're very welcome. It's good to have you on the show. So, as with all these things, we always start at the beginning. University of Wales, Cardiff. Being a Sheffield boy, what drew you down to Cardiff then, Tim?
I kind of ended up at Cardiff via Southampton as well, actually.
Okay.
It's interesting. Well, I mean, I was one of those people taking things apart. I was one of those people kind of curious on what I could do with the things that I made and illustrated. So that kind of pulled me towards product design or industrial design. I had no idea it existed, and a lot of students still don't know it exists. But I managed to connect the dots literally through a friend of mine who was going for a very similar thing. And I grew up in Sheffield with a very working class background, and I think I'm one of the first to go to the university. I didn't really know courses existed at that point. And so I went for a foundation class in Sheffield just to try and find my way a little bit for the first 3 years. Discovered three-dimensional design and what that could be, and then went down to Southampton for a few years. Don't know if you have heard, but in the past we used to have HNDs and degrees, and I did a HND for 2 to 3 years, and then went over to South Wales to do the degree side of it. Yeah, so it's almost like 2 degrees, but I managed to get kind of 2 different things: one very technical side, and then the other more emotional, brand, etc., etc.
Yeah, I think HNDs these days tend to, I don't suppose they've changed too much within design and engineering. Certainly my view of them is they're more akin to an apprenticeship where you've got a lot more industry focus as well, so they have a bit more of the practical element to them than maybe A levels would have. So I often find when I'm speaking to people who've gone through the HND route, they tend to have a little bit more maybe kind of life lessons at this earlier on than some of their peers who have maybe gone down the more academic kind of A-level route. But it's just like you say, it's just a journey into kind of higher education, and then that's a platform to be on. So was it it's like a HND, and then you topped it up to a bachelor's degree with the university, or was that a full kind of 3 or 4 year degree?
If I recall, quite a while ago, but if I recall, I think I went into the second year of a bachelor's from the HND.
Yeah.
I believe. And the HND, I think, was 3 years. So it actually adds up to probably about 6-7 years in all if you take the OND, HND, and the bachelor's. And I agree. It gave, you go into university thinking you know what you want to do. And today's even more that people go into the university and then they discover what they want to do, or they discover things, and that's fine. You follow those paths. And I did a similar thing. That the HND was very, very much a step to knowing how to use my craft, and then the degree was more about how you apply that craft to both emotional and functional problems.
Absolutely. I mean, you did pretty well coming out of university, didn't you? You kind of landed I think you spent a couple of years consulting by the looks of it, if your LinkedIn's correct, but you fairly early days you joined Lego Group. So for a lot of people, that's an absolute dream come true, isn't it?
Well, it is, but it wasn't it's not like an overnight success to get to land a job at Lego. I mean, what you don't see on LinkedIn is the journey people go through before they go through the recognition stage of it. So I was lucky in when I was in the university, I would go to the US a lot. I teach on summer camps a lot.
Okay.
I had travel. And actually at the end of, and this is something I would not recommend any student do, but I actually left my degree a day before my show to go back to the US and teach. Now,
Okay.
looking back on it, I've told my students, don't skip your degree show. That's where you make connections. But I did that. I traveled the US after the summer. I traveled Australia. We went to Australia for close to 2 years, 2-3 years. And did a little bit of kind of work there. Wasn't design related, but it was telemarketing, inbound and outbound. And then I ended up actually teaching people how to sell their products on TV.
All right.
Which was bizarre, because you've got a good product sense, you've got a creative sense, communication sense. So we did that in Australia, traveled, came back to the UK. And what's not on my resume is I worked for Rank Xerox for a couple of years while I was trying to get a design career going. And that helped me deal with customers, helped me deal with internal stakeholders, helped you troubleshoot when something arrives and it's not built. And I think most people who have managed to make it into where they want to make it, in design or whatever it is, they'll probably be able to show you a stack of refusals. And I had a stack of refusals from all the big firms in the UK. And eventually I thought, let's try this differently. So I applied to the Lego group at that time in Windsor in the UK. And my application was very different. It was looking back on it, kind of a whimsical storytelling, fantastic journey that I applied with. So then managed to get that role at Lego. And that was kind of the start of your career or my career. I think one lesson learned there is do not apply for a job in the same way. Understand who your client is or your potential employer could be and use the same language and the things that are valuable to them.
That's something that comes up every time I have a guest on this show is they're talking about kind of those things that they did all those years ago to get that first job or that opportunity are so relevant these days, especially with how easy it is to apply for work these days. It's no effort whatsoever to click apply now, but you put a bit of effort into kind of that application, telling that story, kind of posting it off or kind of going hand delivering it to someone, and you're immediately going to stand out. Even if it's not the right one, they're going to be talking to you and giving you feedback, which is going to help you carry on going. So that's fantastic. And the work you did prior to that as well, I think that's great, because a lot of people would see that as in that moment, maybe I failed here, I haven't got my design job, but all that kind of real world experience, I imagine, well, one made you more determined to get the design job, but also gave you a bunch of key skills and transferable skills that a lot of your peers at the same kind of journey or the kind of age and kind of, they wouldn't have had that. They might have gone straight in and learned on the job there.
Yeah. While it's happening, obviously it's a different perspective because you're so passionate about wanting to get into the space that you want to get into. But you really do, looking back, those skills are highly transferable. Even today, absolutely today, I go back to things that I did with a company in Australia. How you deal with a client who, they definitely want your help and your expertise, but they also have an opinion, a point of view, and an agenda. So that's helped a lot with working with clients all the way through, even internally today when you work with internal group. So don't think of that as a loss. I mean, you look back and see what you can build on it with and how you apply it to tomorrow. Controversially, I've been a consultant, and I still do consult a little bit back and forth. But without the experience, I don't understand how you can be a consultant if you go straight from university to a consulting group. That's just applying technicalities rather than applying actually real world skills.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, experience that's outside of the the usual realm of what you're going to be doing as well. It just gives you a little bit of extra insight, especially when it comes to kind of customers and kind of Joe Public, I guess, in some of those roles. So, and if nothing else, it's formative in terms of kind of reinforcing. Definitely don't want to be doing this for the rest of my life. So,
Yeah,
I know
yeah,
I've had roles like that previously.
yeah. No, I mean, I also do. I think in college we all do different part-time jobs too. I had one at night separating the foil from bad cakes. And that made me kind of two things realize, this is definitely not what I want to do. But also, there's got to be a better way to do this than paying someone to dive into a vat of cake and separate foil. So that's the designer in you, right? There's got to be a better way. Always going to be there.
Absolutely. So, obviously, we're going to go back and forth a little bit here now, but when you're hiring, whether it's kind of in your role now or previously where you've had that kind of reality, either consciously or subconsciously, to people who have gone through that kind of similar journey where it's not necessarily on paper related, but they've had that experience prior to design, is that something that you look for?
I do, and it's not exclusive, but I also look for people who have really had a diverse experience, and that doesn't have to be a vast experience. Once you leave school, you may do a couple of things, but a diverse experience. People who have traveled, or at least sort out different people to them and different worlds to them. People who are able to connect the dots. What did I learn at Xerox that actually helped me today, and what did I learn from, I don't know, KDMS, where we did the telemarketing to Lego. So people who do have more of a diverse background is definitely something that would draw my attention.
Absolutely, and I think
on your resume, especially if you're starting up, put those things on there. I mean, it's really important. But you've also got to, put some thought into, okay, how is this relevant? And how does this make me a better candidate or to really help this organization that's hiring?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's it comes down to your research then, doesn't it, in terms of the opportunity and your creative thinking. How can you make that relevant? And I guess the story that you tell. Apologies if I look all bleached out here. By the way, the sun's just going overhead, and it's
Don't knock it.
Not a lot I can do. But
no, that's after 2 weeks over there with very little sun. I can understand.
Yes, yeah, we'll make the most of it. No doubt we'll start absolutely bucketing it down shortly, but we'll make the most of it while it lasts. So you joined Lego Group then. You spent 5 years there in total. So what things really stand out for you as kind of your kind of favourite memories then from that time?
Yeah, actually the people I work with there are probably the closest friends I've got as well. We keep in touch because we all were of the same age when we joined. We all went through similar, and I think that sticks with me. They've all kind of moved on to different roles, their own businesses, artists, photography, furniture, toy designers as well. So that sticks with me. The people you work with that you resonate with will be valuable to you, not in a kind of a gaining sense, but valuable to you as people in the future. So that really stuck with me. Lego Group was very interesting. At the time, it was not the way it is today. I know today it's a global leader for sure. It's the number one toy and brand organization. At the time, it had some challenges, and that's kind of why we were brought in. We had multiple offices around the world, one in Milan we worked with. We were in Windsor. They had Copenhagen, obviously in Denmark as well, and Japan. And it was really those satellite teams worked very closely together. We had this kind of community of sharing. And that's when I started to understand what collaboration meant. It wasn't about a division of tasks. It's building upon each other's strengths. So that stuck with me as well, that kind of community sense. Our role was really upfront. It was really about taking observations, trends, and place, and shaping that into something that helps promote those behaviors, promote those trends, promote those play patterns. And then we would present it back to the organization. So it would rarely get to a brick level when we were working in that group, we tried to reinvent the brick at one point, and I think it was kind of a round peanut shaped, and it brought some character to the brand, I thought. And we had these characters that we built out of these kind of shapes, and we took it to Denmark and sat down with the engineer, and they said, what if we kind of flatten this edge a little bit, just so the bricks go up together? Oh, okay, we'll flatten it. And then they said, well, what if we flatten this edge too? So we can actually build on it laterally. So, okay, well, if that makes sense, right? Because you can get there volumetrically. And then what if we kind of flatten that point? So it ended up from a peanut to a brick shaped.
Yeah.
But
staying true to the core identity then.
Very much going back to the core. But going back to what we learned, I learned a lot about, when you go to university, you don't necessarily design for a client very often. But then I started at Lego. You start to learn about your client is not just the organization, it's children. So you've got to really do something that inspires someone to pick up that box, to pick up that set. So that kind of icky second, for anyone would say, that millisecond of recognition, that emotional connection is really important before you've even got it in your product in people's hands. Also learned a lot about manufacturing there, obviously. That's where industrial design bleeds a little bit into connecting the dots between manufacturing and thing and brand, and the tolerances and what that really meant to make something that comes out of a machine in the end. And brand. I mean, really, that was my first true immersion in designing for a brand. And that is very important. You've got to stay with your brand values that connect you with the people you're trying to serve, the people you're trying to help. And that was a bit of a learning curve early on. Some of the concept work that I was involved with, the colors were off, the forms were off, the story was strong, the interaction was strong, the kind of surprise and delight was strong, but because of the lack of brand association, it probably was one of the reasons it fell on its face a little bit.
Yeah.
Those are really important.
Must be quite frustrating in some senses for a young, ambitious designer to they just want to show off their creativity, but then it's creativity within a framework of rules, which in some cases sounds contradictory. But yeah, for a business, it's like, well, these are the conditions that you have to be creative in. That's your sandbox, or your kind of toy box, if you like.
Well, I think that's one thing designers learn very quickly too, and that's what separates designers from artists, I believe. Because designers need constraints. You need a problem to solve, whether it's a brand problem, like make my brand relevant, whether it's an emotional problem to connect someone with your products and experience, or whether it's a functional problem, a job to be done. And designers need those constraints. I do. If you give me a blank piece of paper, it's very difficult. Designers make their own constraints. Through the sketchbook, you'll start to actually form in what your own constraints are. And then that's why I said very different from artists. Artists are constraint free, perhaps. It's about action more. Design's about problem solving. So I think you've got to learn that very quickly. That we do have celebrity designers who tend to design for themselves, and that's their brand, and that's their constraints are that they represent their own brand. But as a designer, you really are a problem solver. You really are making connections.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a great comparison there. So you then went from Lego. Then you then went from Windsor, just outside London, and you moved to Chicago. So how did that all come about then? You joined New York Brands then, I think, didn't you? Or was that PDT? Was it?
Yeah, Product Development Technologist.
Yeah.
Well, there's a little bit of a period in the middle of that. So I worked for Lego as a part of the design group, and we were focusing on this core brand, core system, 7 to 14-year-olds. And then I had the opportunity to actually consult with them afterwards instead.
Okay.
So I actually became a freelancing consultant. And that was probably the best thing that happened. And in all truth, it's because they made a lot of cutbacks. They closed a lot of their branch offices. They, at the time, kind of reeled in a lot of the work they were doing with the parts. They actually sold off most of their parts, and they're managed by other organizations. And their R&D got cut, and design got cut. So in one day, I was kind of laid off, like a lot of people are experiencing today.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I was also hired as a consultant on the same day. And,
right. Okay.
That was an emotional roller coaster. I think a lot of people are going through today. And I'll be honest, it was devastating, but at the same time, it was probably the best thing that ever happened in that world, because I managed to consult with Lego. I managed to consult on everything that Lego were touching, whether it was the parts, Dell, accessories, license, core product. I spent time in Michigan, working with groups developing conceptual vehicle interiors. In fact, that project came about because of a lot of co-piloting that Lego were doing with a group. And then we had the idea, well, why don't we do a full vehicle? Why don't we design a whole interior that represents a Lego brand? And I got pushed in front of the owner of the Lego group at the time. I think it was the grandson of the founder, Ola. And I got pushed in front of Kel, saying, you need to present to Kel why we need to do a fully branded Lego vehicle to display at the Detroit Auto Show. Pretty young at that time. Managed to pull it off with a whole lot of Adobe Illustrator and sketch work. And this is kind of the concept. Before even getting to PDT or Lego, that consulting for Lego expanded to different groups too. So I managed to consult with other toy groups, other licensing groups, some technology groups too. And PDT was one of them. They had a client in the UK, and they needed representation through design research, conceptualization, some testing. And I grew that relationship with PDT. And, you talk about what is it that makes you successful? Well, that was an opportunity that just popped up my website or whatever it was at the time, caught someone's eye, and they said, well, let's give Tim a call and see whether he can support us. And then that kind of relationship grew, and there was persistence on both sides, and I had the chance to move over to Chicago to their downtown studio. So
awesome.
It was
yeah,
interesting time. At that time, I was thinking about actually moving to Cornwall with my wife and the dog, setting up a studio down there and kind of learning a little bit of surfing. I scuba dive as well.
Yeah.
But it turned into moving to Chicago.
How different life would have been.
I know it would. It was. We were actually going down there looking at houses.
Wow!
One of the clients was in Cornwall too, which kind of introduced me to the area. And it could have been a very different path. And I think both paths would have been just as fun in different ways.
Absolutely, yeah. But you ended up obviously making the move over to Chicago then, and I spent a few years at 12 years by the looks of it at PDT. Working on, I've got a list of some of your clients that you've worked on here and the awards that you picked up for. So Dell, Corning, Flextronics, Qualcomm, BlackBerry, Harris, Xenex. It's huge. So going from plastic bricks to all manner of different things there then. So lots of learning as you go along.
I think that's what designers do. You ask, what would I look for hiring? It's good to have experience in the particular field that you're hiring for, whether it's, consumer electronics or toys or medical devices. But really, you look for someone who's very, I don't know if flexible is the right word, but people who can flex their skills to different things. And I think designers are good at that. We thrive on taking categories and applying our problem-solving skills to it in a same way or a slightly different way. Because it's all pretty much the same. It's people, connections, technology, business. So it was a big difference. But in one sense, it wasn't, because we were doing the same thing, the same kind of approaches. PDT was very much an engineering firm with a design department. I think there's still a lot of those groups around. Quite progressive, actually. in terms of what they did. We did a lot of work for people like Qualcomm and Corning and Harris and Kyocera, which actually only a fraction of it got to production, because a lot of the work we did was actually helping them demonstrate relevance to their technologies to other clients. So it wasn't traditional manufacturing and design and manufacturing. Like, okay, well, if you've got a chipset, how do we understand how that's relevant to a certain part of the population? And we do a lot of research around, what are people using technologies for? What are the goals they want to achieve? And then we design products to demonstrate that your technology can actually satisfy those needs.
So yeah, there's so much. I mean, consultancy itself is broad by definition, but then there's so much variety within the consultancy space as well. Like you say, kind of engineering led or design led or innovation led or research, and sometimes you'll find those all within one consultancy. Sometimes you've got specialist agencies, and but sometimes you never see it, or you might not see it for years in terms of the projects you've worked on, whether it sees light of day. So
I think my career is filled with things that people have never seen. And you've got to get used to that as a designer too. Not all your projects will go to market. And I'm quite proud that a lot of my projects haven't gone to market, but you see how they've enabled things that we worked on, have enabled glass manufacturers to do some certain things with their glass that brings value and joy. And that's, I didn't realize it at the time, but that's innovation, right? I mean, you're making connections between people, technology, and business, and you're bringing huge value. So that's when I got to really start to think about design, innovation, creativity, how those things play, whether they're the same thing or are they different. So that's kind of where I started to really dig heavily. Relevance of technology, understanding how do we discover what's relevant? How do we discover people and their patterns? And I'll tell you, at the time, there was no such framework as design thinking. It was design research. And most of them didn't want design research. They felt that they knew their customer well, and even though they're asking you to actually innovate, they didn't see the value in understanding their customers in different ways. So I wouldn't say pioneering that kind of start, but advocating for discovery. We'd rename it. Instead of being design research, we'd call it discovery. Instead of kind of user experience design, we'd kind of call it, what do we call it? I think design interaction learning or something like that. So you'd have to reframe things. So we'll do that. That's a good idea.
It's funny, isn't it?
Working at PDT was a very small firm, very quiet firm. They've been through a lot of changes now. They've been through a lot of acquisition. But it gave you a lot of sense of how to deal with clients, especially clients who have a strong point of view. Give you the idea that design is a business. I've always kind of thought that, design has to be financially profitable or culturally profitable. So design is a business. Understanding the speed that you're always going to be under, and the resources you're never going to have, and the time, the understanding that you're never going to have, that you're never going to have a full bag of knowledge, and building that abductive approach. Sometimes you've just got to make a move and learn from it. And that's
absolutely
what we did on a lot of levels.
Are you frustrated by drawn-out recruitment processes, missing out on talent to your competition, or wasting time interviewing candidates who don't quite live up to their profile? Well, if you're the founder or leader of a physical technology brand or design consultancy, here's what we can do for you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Chris Whyte, host of this podcast and the founder of Kodu, a specialist recruitment consultancy focused exclusively on physical product development. By working closely with you and your team, Kodu will help you improve your entire experience of hiring. We'll make it easier to identify, attract, and ultimately hire the very best design and engineering talent ahead of or from your competition. You'll only interview candidates who fit the brief, and we'll work with you to ensure you get the outcome you want, and fast, typically in 6 weeks or less. We have a 100% fill rate, and we guarantee to get you a positive outcome. Simply put, if we don't deliver, you don't pay. But how can I make such a claim? Well, the short answer is I've been doing this for a very long time. Kodu is built from over a decade of my own personal experience hiring hundreds of designers, engineers, managers, and leaders, over 95% of whom are still in post 12 months later. I've personally built an incredible network of thousands of professionals in the physical product design and engineering space covering the UK, US, and Europe. And I've taken what I've learned over the years and put the best of that into Kodu. So if you'd like to spend less time stuck in a recruitment loop and more time doing what you love, get in touch. Email me, chris@teamkodu.com, or message me on LinkedIn. But that's enough from me. Let's get back to the show. And it's so big now, isn't that field of design research, the fuzzy front end kind of design thinking. I mean, there's the businesses set up solely to provide those services to these that are not just manufacturers of products. You've got they're doing research in apps and websites and public services and all sorts. It's a huge field,
Yeah.
and it's been proven as well in terms of design, how companies that are design led and really kind of invest in innovation and understanding their customer and designing products for that, they do better every day of the week. So it's a shame that there's so many layoffs, especially in industrial design at the moment, and how some companies are, as soon as they kind of feel the pinch, design seems to be first to kind of take the hit there. I don't know if you've got any insight into why that might be.
It does, but I wonder whether it's because we live in that space and we see, it's when you say thinking out of the box, it's also looking within the box, right? We look in this particular box and we see things happen. Now, if you went to the other side of that box, it might look a little different. I don't know if design and the creative fields are the most impacted or not. I know technology has been heavily impacted too. But it's tough. I mean, right now, a lot of my world is not just in design leadership, it's in design ops. It's how do we operate? What tools do we use? What are our methodologies? How do we apply that to different fields? How do we quantify impact? And I think that's one of the hardest things. Design's always had a problem quantifying their impact, quantifying their value. So you've definitely got to, along your journey, you definitely got to identify where you brought value or where a discovery helped other people bring value or move in a particular path. As I said, you're never going to have all your leadership understand what design is in its broader sense, and that's okay. That's fine. Just like you're not going to fully understand everything around the business or around a particular topic. But as long as you can identify the connections that you're helping make, and as long as you can identify, the output of design and how it differentiated, how it brought value, how it, if you look at sales, if it's for profit, how maybe sales changed in a particular way, or distribution changed, or even the value of design internally on how it can actually energize. When you bring your superpower of design, whether it's visualization or problem solving or facilitation, and we do all those things, we can talk about those too, how energized a group can be sometimes once they've interacted with you and your team. And that's very powerful. We've done a lot of ideation sessions, facilitation of problem solving or clarity building throughout the roles I've had. And the energy people get from those, not just the output, but the energy people get from those to take back to their teams is actually very powerful. So as a designer, you do need to start to understand and pinpoint maybe where those value points could be and keep a diary of it, keep a visual diary of those successes. They may not be your success, right? It's not look how great we were. But it may be about, hey, this success occurred because as a team, we collaborated in this way across different disciplines.
Yeah, and you just got me thinking there about kind of going back to understanding the customer and designing with the customer in mind. But the customer isn't always external. You've got internal customers and stakeholders as well. And if it's if it's a big organization, and they do this a lot, Samsung with the London office selling to their customers over in head office in Korea and having to get the projects over the line there. So you've got all those different kind of plates to spin and people to consider there. Right.
To be honest with you, I mean, your job as a designer is not. Early on, I used to make fun. It's like there's nothing better than making stuff up and getting paid for it, right? And that kind of gets down to it. But
yeah,
you quickly learn it's a lot of it is human connection. I mean, you are really utilizing or creating that human connection between people and business, people and technology, people and people, and that's your job, is human connection, because everything you create is going to intersect with someone at some point. So you've got to connect the dots from them and to them as well. And that's why I say, as a designer, your job really is as well to inspire people, to really, when you've got something so fragile that's a concept, but it's got solid grounding in truth and knowledge and, a little bit of belief. Your job is to inspire someone to go with you further. And that's often internal groups too.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, it makes the job of getting over the line a lot easier as well if you've got buy-in from all people around you. So look, we're kind of getting through this pretty quickly now. I just want to talk very quickly about obviously your current role then. So we're kind of getting up to date with Husqvarna. So you've been there 2.5 years, and now you're looking after kind of global design for North America. So how did that come about? And you've gone from obviously big brand with Lego to big consultancy working with big brands to really big brand in terms of the kind of the outdoor tools and kind of lawnmowers and agricultural type equipment, I guess. So yeah, Chicago to Charlotte.
Yeah, and there's a couple of stops in between too.
Okay.
With PDT, we set up an office in Austin, Texas for several years.
Yes, yeah.
A lot around technology. And again, connecting people and technology, which is relevant to what I do today. It's connecting, a lot of tech groups, a lot of startup groups, and trying to find relevance and trying to find how do we connect with people to help them do certain jobs when today they're doing jobs in completely different ways. Look at the impact of AI. Your job is going to be different. Yeah. It's not going to be eliminated, but your tools are going to be different. So what I do today is very similar. I always say we're in the role of human connection, as I said before. And it is an interesting path. I previously I took 2 or 3 years teaching at Notre Dame, teaching design and innovation, design thinking to non-design and human connection, right? I mean, I'm trying to connect people with their future success, connect them with different ways of working. I think that in itself, design education and giving students permission to create and think and fail and try, that's a whole conversation that would be very rich too. But towards the end of COVID, we had some life changes. We had some, like a lot of people, you realize, is this where I'm going to be for the rest of my career or not? Or is there other things? And while I was at Notre Dame, I was also consulting, which was awesome. I learned a lot as well while I was there from students and different faculty. And we just came to a conclusion that, hey, we need a bit of a life change because of certain things. And as I made that decision, and it was a very difficult decision, certain things started to emerge as well that made sense to actually take on a role with the Husqvarna group. And they're not hugely known in the US. They've got an incredible brand that I think it's a little bit like Harley Davidson. People who know it actually love it because it is how well it connects them to their environment. And I took on this role in North America. It was a very different role to what it was before me, to really start building human-centered design, to learn from our end users and our choosers. And that was, we do that. Husqvarna has been doing that for a long time, but trying to formalize that in the US. They're at the forefront of technology in outdoor power equipment, which sounds kind of weird. Outdoor power equipment sounds very, very agricultural, as you said, but electrification is very exciting. How do we electrify tools to people's confidence level. What also pulled me in is the world of robotics, where Husqvarna has been making robotic lawnmowers for about 30 years. And now it's in Europe, it's very popular. I think there are like over 4 million units out there. In the US, it's still in its infancy. A lot of cultural differences that we're starting to connect with. And that challenge of, people, technology, and having a broader connection to the business was also very important. So my leadership is in Sweden, but I'm very tightly connected with the business side of North America. So it's a great role to get involved with design leadership, design ops, customer experience. It's a very broad kind of reach that I managed to collaborate across. I'm also a big fan of orange. I've always been a fan of orange color. It's a creative color, right?
So you're just drawn to it then?
Yes. Funnily enough, like if you drill it down to some of those infantile things, that's the brand, the technology. One thing that I forgot about just then is the reason I went to the university is to apply design in a different way. And what I mean there is I was looking for we can design things and we'll always design things, but how do I design behaviors or lives or careers? And same with Husqvarna. We're designing outdoor experiences through our tools. And that was really important to say, if we're as a team going to create things, it's got to have value to the planet and people as well. So that was very alluring to me, that what we do enables other people to create spaces that we'll enjoy, Sunday afternoons or walk in the park. Or that's really the end game, is giving people those experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mowed my lawn for the first time this weekend after breaking my lawnmower the weekend before, breaking the blade anyway. And as soon as the weather was dry and I've got it out there, and I don't particularly enjoy mowing my lawn, but I enjoy the garden being tidier because it's a nice space to be in. And all of a sudden, it's just elevated my outdoor space again. And the new blade was a lot more efficient than the battered old one I had been putting with for years.
You don't know what you don't know until you really have to force yourself in. But
absolutely, yeah.
And that's a point, Chris. I don't think I'm in schools. We teach people to do things. We don't necessarily teach people to think heavily, But even in design, your design, it's not about your design. It's absolutely, I hate to say it, it's not about the inspirational sketch once you've got people on board. It's not about the form of that product once you've made the emotional connection to the form. It's the outcome. And that's what you've always got to strive for. What am I doing here? And what outcome do people want? Or what outcome brings value? And that's, your experience is great. Like, you don't like cutting your lawn, bit of pain having to fix it, but I love spending time out there. So
yeah, it's the outcome. It's a classic sales thing. It's like I'm not selling you a pencil. I'm selling you a means to communicate with other people, or to get your message across.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you need to get a robotic lawnmower, then you wouldn't have to even spend any time.
My garden's like undulated, and I imagine I'd just find it in a heap at the bottom of the garden.
I'm not a sales guy, but we've also got 4-wheel drive ones, which are awesome.
Oh, there you go. Brill. So you mentioned, obviously, before we came on, I went live, and I've torn it off my paper here. So we've covered connection making quite a bit, haven't we? That's been a running theme, so that's fantastic. But you mentioned that you had a story, and I don't know if you covered this actually, but failure at Lego. Run us through that if you don't mind.
We can talk about that. I think we often eradicate those failures from our mind. And I would say, if you're in a design career, you've got to bring those to the forefront because you learn a lot. When I was consulting with Lego, one of the first things that I got flipped onto was the development of a smartwatch, believe it or not. I mean, early 2000s, maybe a little bit before that. we were asked to develop a smartwatch. We were developing other watches too.
Yeah.
Really kind of beautiful themed watches. I still wear mine today, several, because they're fun, they're creative.
Yeah.
But the smartwatch was this unknown. And we had this idea as a collective group that it would be powered by play. So when you play outside, it would give you a reward or a way to play inside.
Okay.
And we had a lot of things there that technologically weren't quite ready that you see today that you're given, right? I mean, it measures your steps, it measures your movement, your breathing, whatever. We're trying to bring that into it. But one of the biggest failures I had on that is I was very new to team leadership. I was very new to applying brand design in certain ways. And obviously Lego brand is very, very, very well known. And you can recognize, most people recognize whether proportions are off on a Lego product, color off.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest failures I had is I didn't know how to lead a team. We were a group of designers, young designers, and we were all doing our own thing. I had an incredible designer who was from Technics, and his work was absolutely incredible, but he was designing all Technics style watches. Another designer was, a little bit more conceptual. So he was designing highly, non-watch formats. Myself, designing it was a time, I think it was just after the iMac came out, or several years of first iMac with Bondi Blue, and taking that influence because the VP loved his iMac. And so making sense of that was difficult, and we all kind of came to the table with a bunch of stuff, and we didn't rehearse our presentations, we didn't convey our relationship, why, and that was a disaster. That was an absolute disaster because we had an iMac watch, we had a Technics watch, we had something that was not even looking like a watch. And for a client to understand that, like, how do I make sense of this? It was terrible. I mean, we got there in the end. We got there to a point where the concept was moving forward technically for the internals and the value it gave. Also the industrial design, where it was very evocative of Lego with color and form to it, but it wasn't a Lego brick. And we got there just in time for that project to get cancelled. So I learned a lot about leadership, about brand. It was the first project, I go back, it's the only project I've missed a presentation on because I missed my flight to Denmark. No. So whole lot of disasters, but we learned from it, we reshuffled, and we picked it up and we moved forward. So.
Pretty tough lesson to learn, and I imagine that the feedback was if it was uncomfortable, but you bounce back again. One of the other things you've got to put up with in design is that your project's going to get cancelled at some point. It's just you can't be too precious over your design because someone out there is not going to like it, or there's just going to be something that just forces it to never exist post what you've already done.
And it goes back to connection too. It's you're not, your design isn't you. The design work you do is based upon a whole bunch of constraints. Yeah. Whether that's a brand constraint, or I go back, emotional or functional constraints. But you've got to understand those constraints and convey on how you're solving those problems within that constraint.
Fantastic, yeah. Brilliant. Right, we're rapidly running out of time, but I'll just shoot a few quick fire questions at you, if that's okay, Tim. Favorite podcast? I don't know why I extended that. Favorite podcast or book that you're kind of into at the moment?
Podcast, probably How I Built This.
That's come up before.
As I've gone through, design's a journey in itself. You find what you love within design, and I love that entrepreneurialism. Always been internally entrepreneurial. So probably How I Built This. Those stories are incredible. Book. I'll give you 2 books. I'm listening to a book by Lisa Genova right now, which is called Remember. She's I don't want to put a label on her that she is, but she's at the forefront of memory. Okay. She's written multiple books around memory. She wrote a book that got turned into a movie, and it's incredible how you can dissect how memory works. So it's Remember by Lisa Genova. Another book that I absolutely love, I could give you all this, but it's called The Silo Effect by Gillian Tett.
Okay.
Gillian Tett is a anthropologist, and she goes into anthropology in business, and how it evolved in far off lands to applying it to close in lands. And I think once you read books or listen to books, you're like, that's what I do, right? That's what we get involved with. You start to realize that what you do, once you put some frameworks around it, people can understand it and build value from it. So I think those two books stand in mind. They're not design books. They're a lot about people and psychology. And I think I would probably be an anthropologist if I knew it existed at some point.
Yeah, and we were talking before we hit record as well about kind of book I'm reading at the minute. I could never split the difference. And it's a lot of that's around connections in people and not necessarily reading people, but playing into kind of human nature to get a positive result. And that kind of thing. You don't need to be a designer to be fascinated by that, but it comes back to your designs about connections as well, I think.
Yeah, it's about people. You're not taught that in school always, but it is about people. I mean, you can have a wonderful portfolio of products, but if it doesn't resonate, if it doesn't solve problems in way, it's worthless, quite honestly, until you build upon it to make it valuable.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Well, that brings us to kind of time, I think, because I'm getting notifications on my email now as well that I've got to jump onto another call. But Tim, it's been absolutely lovely kind of having you on the show. I really appreciate your time. In terms of how people can reach out to you, I'll share your LinkedIn kind of on the show notes. But if there's any other way, kind of, or any events that you're involved in that people can kind of get in touch with you, how might you recommend they do?
LinkedIn is most universal.
Yeah.
I mean, I do a couple of Instagrams, but they're a little bit detached from my work. But absolutely, you can look on Instagram too at TJ Morton. I don't have anything planned this year in terms of events. I did a couple last year, which were great in completely different spaces that I work from. So I'm always open for kind of participating and bringing value there too.
Bro, and I will say to anyone that reaches out to Tim, be on your guard because he'll message you asking you some questions. I can't remember what the questions were that you asked me, but I really liked them when I connected with you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, be at the forefront of that. I have two questions, and they're not they're not both my questions. I think I've discovered them through time. One is, where do you get inspiration from, and what inspires you? Because I think that's a huge part of being a designer. You've got to drive inspiration, and you've got to understand where you get inspiration from too. And then the second question is, what have you changed your mind about recently? And I think I stole that from a podcast because that's important. I think we've all been in a place where we will fight tooth and nail for what's on screen or on paper because you spent time on it. But there's always some truth in what someone's telling you. You might be coming from somewhere else, but you've got to be able to change your mind. You've got to be willing to go in and change your mind because that's how you learn.
I absolutely love that. And when you, because usually I'll connect to people, then I'll send the first message, but you got in there first and asked me those, and I really, really like that because it got me thinking. It's like, what have I changed my mind about recently? And I can't remember because it was months ago when we did it, so I can't remember what I put. But clearly, it had the to connect us anyway. It couldn't have been completely terrible. But Tim, thank you so much for your time again. I've really enjoyed recording this with you. For everyone, thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for listening. I hope you really enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please like and subscribe and tell all of your friends. In the meantime, just a quick note from me. In addition to hosting this podcast, I'm also the founder of Kodu, a specialist recruitment business focused exclusively on physical product development. For a little over a decade now, I've worked exclusively within physical product design and engineering, helping startups and established brands hire mechanical design and development talent from mid-weight up to C-suite. I've worked in consumer electronics, e-bikes, femtech, medical devices, design consultancy, basically user-focused stuff. And it's the wonderful people I've met over the years that have inspired me to create this podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Kodu and how we work, please head over to teamkodu.com or message me, Chris Whyte, on LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening.